First of all, as usual, we should check our motivation. And while doing so, we should bring about a motivation that allows us to think that it is necessary to establish all beings, not just ourselves, in the state of awakening, of complete Buddhahood, a completely enlightened state. With that motivation from the bottom of our hearts, we could then set out to proceed to listen to the instructions about these teachings called the 7 points of mind training. And we start out again, as usual, by way of going to refuge, placing ourselves under the protection of the rare and precious ones, and then pray to the Lama, to our Lama as the essence of these. And imagine how above your heads there is a 1,000-petaled lotus flower with a moon disk upon it. And upon this seat sits your own root teacher, who is in this shape none other but the essence of all the rare and precious ones, of all the Buddhas of every time. Then we proceed to pray to our teacher. Lama Having prayed thus, we then imagine how the Lama now enters into our body through the crown of our heads and how it comes to rest at the center of our hearts, seated in a cross-legged position inside a sphere of 5-colored light that is roughly egg-shaped, open towards the top.
then Lojung and Bengen on it, Tombo, Mendru, and then there's a Lojung song to Sam Tini Condo Santara. That's somebody getting about on this song to go along the Tatela here.
We find ourselves in the middle of the instructions dealing with the so-called 7 points of mind training, 2 of which we have heard already. We have heard of the first part, which is that of the preliminaries, and we have heard of the next part, which is that of the actual giving rise to and nurturing the enlightened attitude, that which we call Bodhicitta. We now move into the third part, in which we receive instructions on how to bring adverse circumstances, difficult circumstances onto the path.
Dele Cheparton, Marankova, Toma, Lulone, Lulambergazo, pardon, Maya, Namaganala, Shandon, Zevi, Tangyori, they into essentially Tangi, guarding Chambo, Yansa.
In this regard, we have heard how all beings within this cycle of existence have shown us and consistently continue to show us great kindness. It is these beings which are the object of our training in such transcendent virtues as generosity or patience. Were there no such beings, how could we ever practice such virtues? Therefore, simply through their mere presence, these beings show us the greatest of kindness, and we should therefore remind ourselves of this. On top of that, it is equally the case that each and every one of these beings, not a single one excluded, have been our kind and loving mothers, not only once, but many times. Therefore, again, while they were our mothers, they showed us great kindness. So this is to be taken into account, the way in which beings, simply for their mere presence, show us their kindness.
Tangarangeti Dumarte Serve Tabla, Yanangarang, Yadana, Nyandula, Yanangaranga, Gendi, Lasoka Tangi, Nyankurchuni, then Shatin, Dorma, Lasoka, Dachembo, Tangaro, Drugum, Tayandu, Tinezite Tanki, Marana, Senon Sapek, Trodan, Marange, Dudu Tanki, Shell, Tro Cheparkin, Tendava Song.
In particular, all those forces in the world, be they enemies, demons, spirits, whatever you might want to call them. All of these forces in the world which cause us either physical or mental harm, which cause us distress in any which way whatsoever, they are the ones who actually propel us forward upon our path of practicing virtue. It is them through whom we start to practice virtue in the very first place. Whatever it is that we might then do for ourselves or for others, like the performance of prayers for the long life of such and such a person, or that we might accumulate recitations of Tara, etc. All of these various practices are being brought about through their influence. Therefore, again, they show us great kindness. In this way, we ought to be thankful to have them, for without all of these influences which appear in such adverse manners, causing us harm, distress, or whatever, causing others distress, etc., we would never be in such a position to be enabled to practice such virtue in the first place. Therefore, again, here lies a very great opportunity.
Tenga Tundro Tangi like Musongaron pains it out of Dona, Musa pains it out. Then Musa paint out Matonaya, and in sending the Tangi Dumana, Tar, Devadon, Dane, Tasso Songi, the Gomon Topa show, Tenda Melon there.
And furthermore, it says, even in regards to even the smallest of beings, even in regard to the tiniest of creatures like insects or beings of that sort, we should be free of any aversion towards them. We should be free of acting in any adverse way towards them, but we should be patient with them. We should show kindness towards all of these beings. No matter what sort of beings there might be, we should endeavor to help them, to be of benefit to them in any which way. And even if we do not find ourselves in such a possibility to truly bring about any help for them at the very moment, at least we should make prayers, wishes and aspirations for their sake. And occasionally there will be harmful forces other than other people, other humans or animals for that sort, beings that we cannot see, that we do not directly perceive. We could call them anything we want, like spirits, demons, elementals, whatever. Give them whatever name you like, but they could manifest in a harmful way. When we experience such harm, then again, we could, instead of trying to retaliate in kind, we could try to think that whatever force it is that causes me this distress, may all the pain or the suffering or the causes thereof, etc., be taken from that being, from that force, and may it come to be ripening in my own self. May I come to experience whatever suffering that being experiences, and on the other hand, may whatever joy, whatever happiness, whatever causes thereof I possess be of benefit to that particular being, to that particular force. May this being enjoy the happiness and the benefits that I have brought about. In this way, again, we are being called upon very clearly to practice to put into practice the exchanging of ourselves for others, exchanging our happiness and joy for the pain and suffering of others, which is none other but the practice of sending and taking. Whatever it might be of these forces, God, demons, spirits, or anything of that sort, whenever we feel ourselves harmed by them in whichever way, we might think that it is actually the case that we ourselves have caused them harm in the past. And that therefore it is only fitting that nowadays they return in whichever shape and return that harm to us, so that we experience suffering, displeasure, distress of whatever type. Therefore, instead of retaliating in kind, we could, for instance, put into practice such ideas as are practiced and taught in the practice of cutting, the practice of Chöd, in which we imagine to offer our body and the constituent parts of our body to such beings. We could offer our flesh, we could offer our blood, we could offer our bone and marrow to them in any way, in any such way as is the most pleasing to them, and in order to repay whatever debt we have incurred with them. We could invite them in such a way as to say, well, come here to this place, all of you, and take this huge mountain that is the flesh of my body and enjoy it to the best of your ability, take it away. Those of you who prefer skin, take the skin and eat it any which way you like it best. And those of you who like to suck and gnaw on bones, well, go do that. And this way, repaying whatever harm we have caused them by way of offering everything that we have to offer to them, including our own bodies. And as we offer ourselves in this way to them, we might then continue to think that through this offering of ours, may you, all you gods and demons and spirits, may you be completely satisfied. May you be completely happy with the offering that I give you, satisfying your every desire, your every need. And as a result of being satisfied in this way, may you yourselves also give rise to the development of the enlightened attitude, both of the conventional as well as the ultimate one, so that also within the stream of your beings, the great awakened heart, the great attitude that is known as Bodhicitta may arise. If we were to look at it quite clearly, we were to see that all of these forces that in any which way causes distress, causes harm, causes pain, etc., in whatever conceivable combination, they are actually the ones who propel us onwards to learn and practice the Dharma in the very first place. If there were no such shortcomings in this life of ours, then we would have pretty little cause to concern ourselves with Dharma. That everything would be nice, everything would be good, we would be living happily ever after, and would not have any cause whatsoever to even concern ourselves with this thing called Dharma and the practice. Nevertheless, occasionally we do experience suffering, we experience pain in adverse circumstances, and the idea becomes rather interesting to do something about protecting oneself from such, to do something from breaking out of this cycle that continuously holds such in store for us all together. And with that, under the influence of such adverse circumstances, we start to concern ourselves with the learning and the practice of Dharma. Therefore, again, it has to be said that all of such forces are of extremely great benefit to us. They're very kind to us. They're just as kind to us as our own teacher is. Particularly those who practice this in this tradition that is called cutting or Chöd would occasionally frequent such scary places as cemeteries, charnel grounds, or other places which are fear-inducing, particularly also in the nighttime when it is dark. They would then sit and perform the practice of Chöd in order to, among other things, also see, well, how many fears are there? how can I deal with my fears? Here I sit in this scary place, the fears become overwhelming, how can I deal with them? And this is one of the methods also which is often employed in order to find out, each practitioner for him or herself, to what extent one has as yet become able to bring one's fears, etc., onto the path itself. This way there are many stories of those who practice Chöd going to scary places in order to test themselves. For instance, that one Chöd practitioner who one night went to a particularly scary charnel ground with his Chöd text, and he started to practice, and as it is the case in such places at night, of course, there are sounds. But there was that one sound which was particularly weird, and it also seemed to be getting louder. And as that happened, he completely panicked. He absolutely just freaked, and he thought, goodness, a demon, let's get out of here. He grabbed his text and he ran. And just from quite a distance far off, he realized, oops, there was no demon in the first place. And how embarrassing. Well, anyway, there was no one to look around, so the embarrassment wasn't all that great. But he then proceeded and concluded the evening with running off to the next tavern and have himself a really good drink.
Benchen, Lama told Jepati Yore, Conga Mena, Master Lamchu. And then Kong, Gumu Gabla, Gamba is a Benji, Gamba, Mama, and Rosa, Torre, Chambus Yoro. That Torre don't song, Anya Saji, Govendo, Satani, made up Tarvan. Made up Satan, Kong, Jet Demas. Then the part of the Tankari, Tanka to make it 11. 단 세모리자 아니 몇지 쓰이나 사네 되니 추첨부 줘라 추첨부 맞죠 바로 내 당간 몇지 줄래 대시래도 뒤콩 깨대서 되니 엄마들 자르고 안 사고 그 몇지 사파는 뒤 추첨부를 간리제 재원이 나서 되니 그 깨대 다 몇지 너 제일라 해서서 내디 잭다 내디 잭다 뭐게포 진도세 아니 다나 컵도 꽃받이 컨두스 컵 컵도 전부 제시 컵 그 꽃받이도 대고 제는 나한테는 제 조금씩 차셔 아니 꽃받이 아니 많대서서 된 다도 된 망을사 된 공태 tormas.
Okay, this is a story from olden times in Rinpoche's own Benchen monastery in eastern Tibet. Some time ago there was this great realized master, a Togden by the name of Matsan Lamchok. And he also occasionally practiced this meditation of cutting, of Chöd. In the vicinity of the Benchen monastery there's a great charnel ground, quite a scary place with many dead bodies lying around, etc. And this is where he used to go to practice Chöd. Now as you sit in this place, more or less opposite the charnel ground there is this huge plain. And in the middle of that plain, more towards the monastery, there is this river. Now, the Togden sat down and he commenced to practice his Chöd meditation, and it started to become dark. And all of a sudden, it seemed to him as if from a distance, from across that plain, a person was approaching. While continuing to do the practice, he thought to himself, how strange, usually at this time there's no one out and about, who could that possibly be? But he proceeded with the practice. Funny enough, that person proceeded to come closer and closer, and also that great river which is flowing through that plain did not seem to be a problem for that person. Instead of simply staying at the other shore of the river, the person apparently kept coming closer. So somehow had found a way of crossing that river. But nevertheless, he kept doing on his practice until this apparition, this person, was right in front of him. It had the shape of an old man, shriveled and bent with age. And at a certain point, while this Tokten kept continuing to do his practice, this old man, he took out a needle which was threaded with a thread, and he stuck it right through the Tokten's nose, pulling the needle all the way through it. Nevertheless, the Tokten kept continuing his practice, wondering to himself what all of this might be about. But as he then, while he continued his practice, looked up, all of a sudden that apparition, that old man, was gone. To summarize all of this, if we were a person that consistently strives only after his or her own good, without taking the good and the welfare of others into account in any which way whatsoever, no matter in what position we might be in this world, we would be nothing else but an ordinary being. However, if we should take into account the welfare of others, then we would truly be a practitioner of such an enlightened attitude, such bodhicitta, as has been said also by the famous Kadampa Geshe Langri Tangpa. Having heard also many Dharma instructions, if I have not learned how to exchange myself for others, how to take the suffering and pain of others onto myself and give away all my joy and happiness, well then I have not understood a single one of all of these dharmas that I have heard. Therefore, let us give away whatever happiness and joy there is for the welfare of others, and let us take upon ourselves their pain and suffering. Now we move into the explanation of how to deal with adverse circumstances by way of giving rise to and implementing the ultimate bodhicitta, which is in accord with true reality. And there is yet again another root verse by the author of these instructions, by Chöd himself, in which he says, "View all appearances and phenomena as the four Buddhakayas, the four Buddha bodies. Their being empty is the great protection." Very generally speaking, the meaning of these root verses of Chöd is to say that generally all appearances and phenomena that we perceive in our lives are of an illusory nature, are free of any existence whatsoever. In particular, of course, all of those adverse circumstances which cause us harm and distress. They are to be likened like the experiences in a dream. For instance, we would find ourselves dreaming, and in that dream we would be burned by a great fire, or we would be carried away by a great flood. Very obviously there is no reality whatsoever to these experiences. They're very obviously dream experiences, and therefore they have no existence, no self-nature onto themselves whatsoever. Similarly, it is the case with all of that we experience in the waking state. Whatever experience, whatever appearance, whatever phenomena we perceive, whatever adverse circumstance that we encounter, they are free of any existence onto themselves whatsoever.
Denpa madru yando denpa rinzai. Do meba la do do zong. Nga meba la nga ro zong ne. Then dancing ke. Then pena nga ro sana. Chenpo yowa la tin. Then saro promote the denpa madru yando nga nepa yongwa ne.
If all of these appearances and phenomena, in particular all of these adverse circumstances, are truly non-existent, free of any nature onto themselves and free of any influence which follows logically, then how come that we experience them as so real? How come that we truly experience harm, pain, and distress of whatever sort? The reason for this lies in the fundamental error that has solidified over countless lifetimes of ourselves to believe that whatever appears to us has its own nature onto himself, is truly, really existent. And this starts with the very root cause of all the troubles and all the problems that we experience, which is this fundamental error of believing in the existence of a self. We believe that there truly is such a thing, while if we were to look at this self, we would see there is no such thing, nor has there ever been such a thing. Yet, throughout innumerable lifetimes, we have conditioned ourselves into believing that there is such a thing, believing that appearances and phenomena are truly real and existent, and therefore we also live under the impression that such circumstances could be harmful to ourselves. Now, having heard about these points, we could simply, whenever we experience whatever it is that we perceive, simply leave it as it is, without letting anything follow out of it, particularly in adverse circumstances when we're under the impression of experiencing harm or pain because of such and such a circumstance. We could simply look at the appearance that seems to bring about the harm for ourselves, simply leave it at that and recognize it as being completely empty of any self-nature onto itself, being completely free of having any substance, having any existence in any which way whatsoever. This is what we could do. Then, on top of that, while we live in the, while we simply leave it at this experience of the phenomena being empty, whatever harm we have seemingly experienced, we simply look at it as our own delusion, as our own wrong idea, our own deluded perception thereof. And leaving things at this, we could then simply just rest within this state without letting anything follow thereof, simply remaining in a restful state, experiencing the actual phenomena, the actual appearance or circumstance as being truly empty, free of any nature. This is nothing else but Dharmakaya. Nevertheless, there is an appearance very clearly. This appearance is none other but Nirmanakaya. This appearance, appearing clearly on the one side and on the other side being empty, is none other but Sambhogakaya. But however, all of these are being clearly linked, are being clearly a union, an indivisible union, and that is none other but Swabhavikakaya. So in this way, as has been mentioned in the root verse in the first place, all appearances and phenomena are to be seen, are to be experienced as none other but the four Buddha bodies. So all of that truly being the case, what is to be done? The only thing that needs to be done is simply to rest in this consciousness and this awareness, recognizing that there is no origination in any way whatsoever, that there is no particular dwelling, no particular way in which consciousness or this appearance or the experience of such awareness rests in any way, and that there is also no cessation of any kind whatsoever. Simply resting in this state is called or is known as the resting uncontrivedly in mind nature. All of which brings us to the third point of how we actually apply, how we actually, in our actual application, bring circumstances of whatever sort onto the path in order to make them a means to propel us towards the great awakening. And concerning these points, again, Shakya says there are four exalted applications to be employed. The first of these is the increase or the constant accumulation of the two stocks of merit, that of merit itself and that of primordial awareness or wisdom. The second of these applications is the constant confession of misdeeds, which we have performed since time beginningless throughout all of our lifetimes. The third application is that of presenting God, demons and spirits, etc. with presents and offerings such as tormas. And the fourth application is the offering of tormas and other offerings to dakas, dakinis, protectors and guardians of the Dharma.
Devana Togo Mundu. Mendeba de Dumare, Dumana Tado Yungando, Tiyandu, Deveke, Jote, Geva Drupgogan, Dumanga Jote, Dipa Pangogan, Dosa, Lama Kunjo Sana, Chepa, Marubin Chepa Kasi, Porto, Chepa Port, and Gandin Chala, Yangurse, Shapin Song, Kisho, then Jumbo La Soba Tamji, and Torma Gang. 创上说人的，创上见的，那两个，各种途径跟那的，慢慢前面开始不走走，前面不，刚刚查查的，创过完节吧，他见到是那个出少部分都。
Such are the four applications that can be applied in order to act in beneficial ways. Now, when we look at the first one, in which it says that we should perfect the accumulation of the two stocks of merit, All of these are designed in order to bring about fortuitous circumstances so that we may not experience suffering, and that we may instead experience happiness and joy. Isn't this what all beings want? They want to experience happiness and they want to avoid suffering to whatever extent they're possible to. And therefore these various means, which are then enumerated afterwards, are efficient means to bring this about. In order to accumulate merit, for instance, it is said that the greatest thing that one could possibly do is to constantly present offerings to the Lama and to the three rare and precious ones, to the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Whenever we encounter members of the Sangha, we should address them, we should look at them in a very respectful way. Whatever harmful forces there might be, like god, demons, like spirits of whatever sort, we should present them with offerings like tormas. We should occasionally perform the practice of Chöd, of cutting, and offer our own bodies to them. We should occasionally offer the practice that is known as sur in Tibetan, which is the burning of foodstuffs in a fire and offering the smokes that come thereof, particularly in order to appease karmic creditors, etc. We should proceed also to offer batelems or tsatsas, which are small stupa-like or figure-like earth contraptions. Then, of course, we should also occasionally offer prostrations and the like. All of these activities, if practiced with a pure motivation, increase our stock of merit. Two other means which are very efficient in the way of accumulating merit is the performance of the so-called 7 branches and the offering of mandalas. So the morning session is finished with that. If there should be any questions, we might go into some of them.